Hello, hello. Welcome back or welcome to the Restoring Balance podcast with Megan Garza. This is episode 9, and the title of today's episode is Exercise for Female Physiology and Cycle Syncing. So, before we get into today's episode, if you are a fan of the show, this is just a reminder of how you can support the podcast by giving it a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify podcast, which helps the algorithm get my show to other listeners who would benefit from it just like you. So, without further ado, let's dive in. First and foremost, I do want to apologize for this crazy leave of absence that I've had. I know it's been several years since I've posted on my podcast, but it is going to be a more regular thing as I am finally in the physical space to be able to record regularly. And also an apology for my terribly nasally voice, and it probably sounds really scratchy and rough. I've been fighting a cold or a flu for the past week, and I'm just now finally getting over it. So thankfully, I'm feeling a lot better, and I do apologize for the silly sound that my voice probably has. So things are going to be relatively the same in this podcast. So I'm still going to be focusing on digestion and hormones, but there's also going to be a dive into other subtopics like sleep, trauma, goal setting, non-toxic living, food intolerances, and a lot more. And all of this is going to tie into your overall goal to help you improve your digestion and to balance your hormones. So, we're going to talk about the basics of exercise first. So, what is the definition of exercise? Merriam-Webster's definition is any activity that requires physical effort carried out to sustain or improve health or fitness. And unfortunately, many of us can look at exercise as a chore. You look at it as something that we have to do rather than something that you get to do. And this is a very unfortunate way to look at exercise. And I'm not saying that everyone does this. I'm sure there are some people that absolutely love fitness and love exercise and are listening to this podcast and they have a routine that really works for them. But I'm sure there are going to be other listeners who are not in that space just yet. So I'm going to kind of touch on both of those points. So it is a privilege to move your body. So there are some people that cannot move their body in certain ways because of age, or maybe they have some kind of physical injury or chronic illness. So this is why it's important to look at exercise as something that you get to do, and it is a privilege. Now, some of the reasons why exercise is important. So, some of the kind of buzzwords that you hear, I'm going to briefly touch on that. So, exercise increases serotonin and dopamine levels, which will boost your mood and also lower anxiety. It can combat health conditions. So, things like diabetes, high blood pressure, arthritis, and stroke are diminished. Any risk of that are diminished when you exercise regularly. Exercise can also boost your energy, so it delivers oxygen and nutrients to the tissues and improves cardiovascular health. It can help you sleep better, so it can help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, as long as you're not exercising within 3 hours before your bedtime. And lastly, and I think this one is the most fun, is the fact that you can bond with your workout partner. So if you've had a workout partner before, whether it's your romantic partner or a friend or a relative, you know what I'm talking about, because when you go and exercise with that person, whether it's just a walk in the park or you're actually going to lift heavy weights in the gym, or even when you are cycling fast and you're not really talking to that person because you're focusing on exercise, you do get a level of bonding with that person, which is incredible because we need that social connection in our lives. And unfortunately, like I mentioned before, most people do live sedentary lives, which increases our risk for all-cause mortality. And this can be due to work schedules, maybe the convenience of Western life has just caught up with some people. Depression can be a really big factor for not wanting to exercise, not having the motivation for it. Maybe unhealthy relationships with your body or exercise is keeping you from doing it. Injuries can definitely cause problems with exercise and functional movement. Long work hours. So, again, kind of touching on the work schedules and maybe not being able bodied. So, there are some people that don't have the physical capacity to exercise. But this is where redefining our viewpoint of exercise and movement comes in. So typically, we look at exercise in a lens of doing things like sports or swimming, weightlifting, yoga, running, gymnastics, things like roller skating, walking, and body weight exercises. So, you look at this and think how daunting that is for some people when they are getting into it. I know that when I was first getting into exercising, I was so confused. I didn't understand what I had to do. I had a very unhealthy relationship with what I assumed exercise was, and I didn't really think about what it actually was. And we're going to touch on that in a minute. So, looking at exercise as just things like sports or weightlifting or really high intensity things can be really scary for some people, and that is rightfully so, because when you haven't exercised in a while and you try to pick up this crazy routine, you are going to face a lot of roadblocks and you might even give up. So, redefining our viewpoint, our view of exercise and movement, maybe looking at it in a way of gardening or playing with your kids or your pets. Maybe you could even just bike for leisure, taking the stairs or parking far away from the store. Maybe you could even dance when you're cooking, or even things like getting up from your desk every hour to move around and stretch, and walking after lunch or meals. These are just little ways to kind of shift our viewpoint of what we think movement is and exercise is, because it's not just, I'm going to sit at a desk for 8 hours a day and then I'm going to go to the gym and do some cardio and weights, because that's not a realistic way to look at movement. Because if you are just sitting there for 8 hours a day and then you are pushing yourself at the end of the day to carry out activities that your body might not feel comfortable doing, that could increase your risk for certain injuries and also just fatigue in general. So getting up from your desk every hour and moving around and stretching is a great way to incorporate movement. And also just shifting our viewpoint, realizing that exercise and movement does not have to always be a high intensity thing. So, shifting on to the next subtopic in this podcast. So, why must women move in different ways than men? Or why should we even care to move in according to our physiology as women? So, first off, women are vastly different than men. I know this should come as no surprise. Men and women are completely different. Our hormone levels fluctuate throughout the month, which can interfere with our energy levels and our strength. And also, our bodies require different forms of exercise and nourishment depending on where we are in our cycle. So, depending on where we are, it's going to dictate how we feel and how we should carry out specific exercises. So, the four phases of the menstrual cycle are deeply related to your exercise routine. And this is because the hormone levels fluctuate. So, you have four different phases: the menses, the follicular phase, the ovulation phase, and the luteal phase. So the menses is when you bleed. This is when the hormone progesterone plunges, the lining of your uterine begins to shed, and your energy is the lowest. So typically, this bleeding phase will last anywhere from 3 to 7 days. The follicular phase is after menses and right before ovulation. So, this is when your pituitary gland releases a hormone called follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, which stimulates the follicles in your ovaries to mature. So, these follicles contain eggs, and estrogen and testosterone start to rise. Your libido and your mood will begin to increase, and you'll just feel more energy around this time. And then you have ovulation. So, this is when you're going to have peak fertility, peak energy levels, and this is the time where the egg gets released from its follicle in your ovary and it survives for 12 to 24 hours waiting for implantation. Estrogen and testosterone rise to peak levels here. And then lastly, you have the luteal phase. So this is after ovulation and before menses. It's about 2 to 3 days into this phase, your estrogen and testosterone levels will decline and your body produces more progesterone. And this is typically the time where women with hormone imbalances or poor estrogen detoxification, PMS will happen for these women. So that I just want to kind of throw that out there. That's the luteal phase is when PMS can happen for some women. So now moving for your psychology. Some people call this cycle syncing, and I think it's a really great way to kind of clue into what your body's telling you and to kind of schedule your exercises around where you are in your cycle. And like I said, if you have hormone imbalances, sometimes this can be a little bit harder to do, but tracking your cycle is going to be the best way to know where you are in your cycle. So you can do that using the symptothermal method, and that's a really popular way where you track your basal body temperature, your cervical fluid, and you kind of chart all that stuff together to get an idea of where you are in your cycle. So during menses, your body is needing rest. So this is not the time to be doing heavy exercise. So maybe holding off on high intensity interval training workouts or HIIT workouts. Hold off on hot yoga or weightlifting. Instead, opt for things like yoga, stretching, walks, and maybe gardening, maybe playing with your pet, deep breathing. So this is just a time to slow down and go inward. After menses, during your follicular phase, your estrogen and testosterone will be rising. So now you can start to push yourself a little bit more during this time. So choosing exercises like light lifting, swimming, jogging, and hiking can be very beneficial. During the ovulation phase, higher intensity workouts are going to be easier. So things like step climbing, HIIT workouts, heavy lifting, these are all excellent choices to pick when you are in your ovulation phase. And then the luteal phase, the low, medium intensity exercises would be a better choice to opt for. So things like strength training, Pilates, walks, and light bicycling. So these are things that would probably feel really therapeutic and just feel good for your body. So, that being said, these are just guidelines. They do not have to be followed to the T. You do not need to be boxed in by these rules. So, you don't need to force yourself to do a HIIT workout around ovulation if you don't feel like it. So, also, you don't need to take the week off from exercising in a certain way when you're on your period just because you've been told that you should. So, if you feel okay, lift those weights. If you don't feel like you have a lot of energy, don't do a HIIT workout during your ovulation phase. So, these are not specific guidelines that you have to follow. So, for example, my last cycle, I went to the gym and I was on my fourth day and I was able to lift weights and I felt totally fine with that. But on the first 3 days, I was not going to do that. I just wanted to relax and to stretch and go for walks. And that is what my body was telling me to do. But I felt okay enough to go lift weights on my cycle when I was bleeding. And that was fine for that month, but maybe this month it'll be different or the next month it'll be different. So it's really just about understanding why your body feels different in every phase and leaning into that. So listening to the subtle cues that your body is telling you is really what the overall message of this episode is about, because it's not about following this exactly as I say, because we are all different and there are many other factors that are going to influence how you feel and also how your mood is. So things like stress, how well you slept, the food that you ate, if you're sick, the people that you interact with, and how well you're digesting, and just so much more. And lastly, I want to say about the cycle syncing is only possible when your hormones are balanced and you're not on hormonal contraceptives. Let me say that again. Cycle syncing is only possible when your hormones are balanced and you're not on hormonal contraceptives. So you need to be in alignment and in sync with your natural fertility in order for cycle syncing to be applicable to you. Okay, so another thing about exercising and something that I see has been going around so much is fasting for women. And this is not a poo poo on fasting. I think that fasting has a time and a place. However, fasted workout studies are done primarily on men. Going back to what I said earlier, female and male physiology is vastly different from one another. So, if you are exercising in a fasted state, this can negatively impact your thyroid function. It can negatively impact your metabolic activity, bone formation, and also hormones. Women are also more likely to report increased anxiety after exercising in an underfed and overworked state. And lastly, training fasted increases cortisol, which promotes fat storage and can decrease the available building blocks for your other hormones like progesterone. So, when you are exercising fasted, it is setting your body up for metabolic catastrophe. So, when you are exercising fasted, you are not leaning into female physiology and honoring your divine feminine. And it doesn't even have to be a big meal that you work out, that you eat before you work out. I'm not suggesting that. I don't think that's a great idea. You shouldn't go eat a huge meal and then go for a run or do like heavy weight training, because that's not going to make you feel good. You're going to feel sluggish and maybe even nauseous. So instead, opt for eating a mix of carbs and protein about 30 to 45 minutes before your workout. So this can include foods like sprouted nut butter and toast, maybe things like eggs and toast, maybe raw milk and fruit, or a protein shake, or a banana and nut butter. So this way, if you are eating before the workout, you are not taking glycogen stores from your liver. Rather, you are giving your body glucose that it needs to be fueled during the workout. Again, you are not taking glycogen stores from your liver when you are fasting. If you eat, you are giving your body the glucose that it needs to be fueled with during the workout. So, on top of that, when working out, there needs to be some type of balance. Like I mentioned, I had an unhealthy relationship with exercising and eating in the past. And this is where the balance comes into play, because you shouldn't be over exercising or under exercising. There really needs to be a balance in the scales here to make sure that you are moving optimally, that is not depleting your body or you're just not doing anything at all. Again, you have to be fueled for the movement. So you shouldn't be exercising fasted all the time. That's just not a great idea, as because of the things that I mentioned above. And lastly, listen to your body. Listen to your body, please. If there's anything that you take from this podcast, it is listen to your body. So if your body doesn't want to do what it did yesterday or last week or last month or last year, that is totally fine. You're not the same. You are not a robot. You're not going to wake up feeling the exact same way every single day. There are so many variables that can interfere or can impact how your body is feeling on that specific day and that time. So really listen to your body and go with that. So if you planned that you were going to go for a run and you wake up and you just feel absolutely terrible, You do not have to force yourself to go for a run. You don't. You really don't. So, really listening to your body and taking account of how you're feeling, what you ate, and just overall the big picture of your health. So, kind of jumping ship, movement does have to be enjoyable as well. So, we kind of talked about this earlier a little bit, but in order for it to work long term, you have to start small and it has to be enjoyable. So, eventually you can create a game plan. So things like enjoying biking, if you enjoy biking, just bike to work or maybe even halfway. If you want to get stronger and you aren't sure where to start, maybe go get a gym membership or try some calisthenics at home if you are more into home workouts. There are tons of YouTube channels out there that have wonderful, wonderful free programs to learn about this kind of stuff. Again, walking after meals to help stabilize your blood sugar, because that way it'll tell the glucose where to go. And overall, it'll just help your energy levels. So, this is pretty much applicable to anybody. This is something that you should be doing after every meal, if possible. I know that it's not possible for every single meal for some people, but that's okay. Just whenever you can, just go for a walk after you eat. Maybe if you like dancing, you can dance while you're cooking. Or when you are watching a show, maybe you can do push ups or squats during commercials or in between shows because it's so easy to just sit on the couch and to binge on Netflix or YouTube. And it's like there's no ads and it just keeps going and going. So, really making sure that you are not just sitting there for hours and hours on end because not only is that bad for your body, it's bad for your mind, and also you can really have some serious stiffness in your muscles if you don't stand up and stretch. And now on to the topic of weight loss. So, this is a huge motivator for many people to work out. And unfortunately, if you are just working out specifically to lose weight with no other goals in mind, it is most likely destined to fail. So, your desire to work out must be an intrinsic motivator. So, an intrinsic motivator is something that is an internal reward. So, this can be something along the lines of that exercise makes you feel good emotionally and physically. Another intrinsic motivator would be trying to achieve a personal goal, like maybe getting your blood sugar under control or get better sleep, or even because you want to get stronger. So there's a huge difference between an intrinsic motivator and an extrinsic motivator. So the extrinsic motivator is something where you are focused on the external reward. So that would be because you want to look good in a dress, or maybe you want to impress your spouse or your friend. Maybe you're feeling forced to exercise because you said yes to a workout program that your friend asked you to participate in and you don't really want to. Or I'd say probably the last one and the worst one would be punishing yourself to exercise. Again, exercise has to be enjoyable. It is not used as a method of punishment. It is not going to help you. It is not going to make you feel better. And overall, you are just going to not be able to stick to a routine of exercising if it is solely used as punishment because it's something that's supposed to make us feel good. So, extrinsic motivators cannot be the sole reason that you choose to work out. You have to have a mix of intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. So, writing that down, if that helps you, can be a really good starting point. So, that way, that can be your why, because I know that exercise can be a struggle for many of us. So, really sitting down and asking yourself, why do you want to work out? Why do you want to exercise specifically for female physiology and syncing with your cycle? So, kind of touching a little bit more on the whole weight loss aspect, body fat is not the enemy. So obviously too much body fat is not good. We do have an obesity epidemic and a crisis here in many Western countries, especially America. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying just let yourself get to be whatever size that you want to be, because in the name of, quote unquote body positivity, like that is not healthy for your body. That is not good for anybody. And it's just perpetuating a narrative that is harmful. However, having some body fat is not a bad thing. You need body fat for ovulation and a healthy metabolism. In order to ovulate, you need at least 18% body fat. You need at least some body fat, because when you get to be super thin, your body cannot function properly. So, a lot of women find to feel their best anywhere from 20 to 30% body fat from the women that I've talked to. I'm sure that there are exceptions to this rule. I'm not doubting that. However, making sure that you are not pinching your sides and looking in the mirror and talking bad to yourself because you have a little roll here, or your body doesn't look like an Instagram model, because those are all fake anyways. So having some body fat is a good thing, but making sure that you are not talking bad about yourself, and that, again, you're not punishing yourself to exercise. And lastly, to tie it all into the overarching topic of digestion, exercise absolutely does help with digestion. This is because it helps with the autonomic nervous system and peristalsis. And peristalsis is the involuntary relaxation and contraction of intestinal muscles. So this can help with bowel movements. This is super important for people who are suffering from constipation. Again, exercise is not only for people with constipation, but it can absolutely help you if you are dealing with constipation, at least going for a mile walk every day if you are able to, and just getting that movement in. So again, about the kind of the talking about the over exercising aspect of things. So when you over exercise, this can lead to burnout and high cortisol and puts your body in a sympathetic state. So this is harmful to digestion because it'll be compromised. Instead of digesting, it'll be focused on fight or flight and just kind of keeping you alive and in survival mode. So again, back to that whole topic of balance. So finding balance and nourishing yourself before and after workouts. And that goes for all things. And I'm not just talking about food, I'm talking about sleep. I'm talking about your emotional state for finding balance and nourishment. So there's so much more that goes into nourishment than just the food that you're eating. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. That is all the time that we have for today's episode. So, today we covered the importance of exercise, the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, cycle syncing, working out in a nourished state, how exercise must be enjoyable for long term success, and the impact your hormones and exercise have on digestion. You can expect new episodes every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And just a quick reminder again of how you can support the podcast and stay in the loop. Make sure that you sign up for my email list. That way you can be notified every time I post a new podcast episode, make any new announcements about my services, and how you can work with me, and also receive weekly relevant tips for digestion and hormones so you can optimize your health. My email list is the first to be notified about all of these things and is the best way to stay in the loop. You can find the link to sign up for my emails in the show notes, or head to my website at megangarzawellness.com, and you can wait for the pop-up or under the freebies tab. Again, I want to thank you again so much for listening to this week's topic, and I will see you again in the next episode. Take care, everyone.